Go. All right. Hey, James. Thanks for making the time for the call today. We'll start out with you just introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about your goals with training, who you are, what you do.
All right, thanks, Matt. So my name is James Lynn. I'm a 52-year-old corporate executive. Work basically behind the desk most of the time. Run basically procurement for a crown agency of the government. Been doing lifting weights since I was like 14 years old, and martial arts since I was 15, and then powerlifting since I was about I guess 45 or so. Got interested in powerlifting just because I felt I didn't really know how to lift. And despite some initial success, I guess earlier this year, as I was sort of ramping back up post-COVID lockdowns, and it was some sort of mystery injuries to my lower back and hip, and felt like I just wasn't really making any progress and needed some help. And that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah. I remember you mentioning once we'd started talking how you could add on some weight and stuff, and then it would just be like right away there would be issues with your knee or issues with your back, or even the sciatica would just put the brakes on things really, really quickly, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, back in April timeframe, there were some times that, I was lifting like 250 plus, no problems. And then the next day or like later in the week, I couldn't lift 135 without like a lot of pain in a squat.
Yeah. Yeah, and just wildly fluctuating, right? So
Correct.
we'd started out with momentum, which is getting a really clear assessment on, taking a look at seeing if it was a technical issue with the lift, seeing if there was some postural components and mobility and stability issues that were holding you back. And I'd say we found some areas for improvement in pretty much all three of those categories there. So we started out with actually pulling back a bit from the main lifts and working on more variations that were going to build up your technique, as well as give you a place to continue to get stronger and build up your weak points without having to say, oh, let's deload to an empty bar, right? On top of that, outside of the barbell realm of things, we'd worked on a lot of the postural work and breath work to just open up mobility, because we did find that there was a pretty noticeable asymmetry between your left and your right hip. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of your experience with some of that asymmetrical stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked it. I think if left to my own devices, I probably would not have gone back to my programming, kind of went back to fundamentals to figure out that I do have, asymmetries and then other issues that I wasn't really addressing, right? So, typically I would just use a barbell. Your programming focused a lot on like isolating one side versus the other, and then doing like I don't want to say unstable movements, but like doing a sort of solo work one side versus the other, and then rebuilding me back up, right, one step at a time. I think also your emphasis on like my technique as opposed to just loading on the weight was also a step that I had to get around. I was too eager to kind of jump ahead, and but in the long run, I think that was actually quite beneficial to like take those steps and like follow the programming as you basically prescribed. Other things too, you introduced a lot of movements that like I had no clue about before, like honestly, right? And I think in the Momentum program, all that video archive, understand and see like the techniques. Although it took me a while to figure out that like I can't just watch it and go to the gym and try to remember it. Right? I had to like be a little more careful about like writing down certain details to focus on. But I think sending my clips to you and getting your feedback and then getting better at that as I got deeper into the program, that helped a lot in terms of improving my technique and then actually just my actual execution of the moves.
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of numbers, we definitely started out with a much more conservative approach initially with the training, focusing on dealing with the issues at hand, getting that asymmetry sorted out, getting the imbalances with quads and hamstrings sorted out as well. And by the end, we'd worked up to some pretty decent numbers at the end of the 4 months. We got you up to pulling about a 280 deadlift, about 225 for 5 squats, and benching 175 for reps as well. If I'm not mistaken, I think you'd mentioned on when we'd initially started with coaching, your previous PR from the last meet that you'd done was 170 on bench, right?
Actually, I think it was like 203 or something like that. But the thing is, regardless, I think my form is much better, right? Through this process, I wasn't bracing properly in the bench press. I don't think I was actually doing leg drive properly because my previous physical coach didn't really cue that too much. And then correcting sort of like the asymmetry between my left arm flaring out more than my right, and then knowing how to basically break that bar. Those are a lot of things that, like, despite what I thought I knew about powerlifting, through this program, you actually helped fix a lot of those things that I didn't know how to do, right? So I would say I'm actually a better bencher. And, I'm less concerned about the weight as the fact that I'm getting technically better, because I think that will drive me further in the long term.
Yeah, I agreed. Yeah, I'd say your technique as the technique got better, your consistency with those heavier weights got a lot better as well, was one big thing that I noticed.
Yes. And then not just, I mean, the bench, but like even the squat as well as the deadlift. Like, I mean, on the squat side, I've always been just a low bar back squatter, right? So, doing front squats and doing high bar, there was sort of like I mean, we wouldn't say quite fully foreign concepts, but they definitely helped fix a lot of things, right? And then again, back to the bracing, where I basically did the tripod with my feet, where I kind of distributed the weight. Those were things that I hadn't thought of as much before, right? So those are things that I'm still, I would say, still learning, but you definitely helped improve significantly. And then my numbers increased. Like, I would say in the beginning, it's kind of like slow progress, still kind of figuring out. But then I think kind of through the middle towards the tail end of the program, I kind of got much stronger, a lot faster.
Yeah.
Right. And then deadlift wise, same thing. Like also getting my cues correctly. You were actually very progressive. It was, in hindsight, very intelligent the way you did it, because you had me sort of hinging towards the wall first, doing certain moves to eventually, towards the end of the program, I was doing like sets of 225 with the half-inch band, right? And then focusing on really trying to drag up on my shins, not having the bar sort of wander as much. Same thing about the bracing. You also kept in mind, just I also had a bit of a bicep injury, so just keeping that in mind in terms of my grip. So yeah, I think all those things helped a lot. So despite the numbers not necessarily being like where my previous maxes were, again, my technique overall is better, and I think that will serve me again better long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say if we look at, the progress you've made over the last 4 months, and then, you add another 4 months to that, if you can keep that, positive trend going, I mean, that serves you well in the long run, as opposed to what you had before. It was very volatile, right?
Yeah, up and down, and I think like highly imbalanced to certain things. I mean, I found out because I'd never done like sort of glute ham raises. Like, okay, I started from like literally
Yeah.
zero. I couldn't do a glute
Yeah.
ham raise with even like a band, right?
Yeah.
And towards the end, I think I was doing like sets of 8 or something with like I think 5 or 10 pounds at least, right?
Yeah.
And I could be good at it. A lot of the split stagger stance deadlifts and other things with dumbbells. Those are things I had not traditionally done before, and I think that also helped a lot in terms of like improving my mobility and then like basically my posterior strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the posterior strength and that unilateral strength, so like one leg at a time and one arm at a time, has been instrumental for you in just creating a more well-rounded base to work from.
Yeah.
So what were, if you were to say, top 2 biggest takeaways from your training from Momentum program, what would they be for you?
I needed a lot more variety in what I was doing before. I pretty much stuck to a very minimalist type of program that even though it served me well for time, it couldn't get me out of the hole when I basically ended up with an injury, right? And then I think technically I learned a whole lot in terms of how to improve my lifts, right? And the things I actually need to do with the different lifts.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Any final thoughts or anything else you'd want to add?
I mean, overall, great program, like heavy time commitment, right? Sometimes, I'm going to the gym going, oh my God, why did you put this in my programming? And it's like, it takes
Yeah.
discipline to get through it, but
Yeah.
I think it's worth it overall, right? I mean,
Awesome.
from where I started to, 16 weeks later, my improvement and sort of like, where my progress was, I was pretty happy.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you very much. I'm really happy with, the progress you've made over the last 4 months, and hopefully that trend continues. Yeah, awesome. So if you're watching this and you're feeling stuck in your training right now, drop a comment, just mention progress in the comments below. I'll get in touch, see if we can help. James, thank you very much for your time, and we'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Matt.